if an athlete hires somebody who hasn't taken the necessary steps by working with the state and getting properly registered, well, what does that mean they're going to do when they're working on your behalf, right? Are they going to cut corners with you, right? Are they going to charge you too much? Are they going to forget to do something? What's that mean? Are they going to or encourage you to take a deal that might not be the best fit for you?
Be the story. Welcome to Brand&Athlete. Really excited. We have Keith back. Keith Miller is back in the studio. Keith, it's so good to have you back, man. I missed you.
Oh, I missed you too, Jay. I'm glad to be back, but I'm even more excited to have our guest on today. We got a good one.
Yeah. We have the one and only Josh Lentz. Josh, who is just a brilliant mind. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I can't wait to dive in and just get a lot of your insights. I've been reading some of your publications and watching some of your interviews, so I'm really excited for the show that we have. But before we do, Keith, you have some thank yous to do.
Well, I want to thank our sponsor, Influxer. Before we dive into this conversation with Josh, Influxer is a great sponsor of ours, and they've been very supportive, and love for everybody to check them out.
Yeah. Josh, but before we do, I have to give you a huge recommendation. You're an attorney. You're a former compliance officer. You've worked for some big brands, Baylor, a whole bunch of other places. You guys can Google him and do that on your own time. His resume, it's really impressive. And so I'm really excited to have you today because I feel like, and Keith, tell me what you think as well before we dive in. There's so much going on right now, guys. It's like every day I open up my phone, I pick this thing up, and it's like, okay, what am I going to read today? And hopefully you can help us navigate all this.
Yeah, it's funny, Jay, because, I've seen the comment on social media that there's a lot of people getting the amateur sports law, education right now just from following, things on social media because of everything happening in college sports. One of the things I love this area, and one of the reasons I love having Josh on here is, he's brilliant with this area as well. He makes it very digestible for folks to understand too, but he can get into the weeds and get really technical as well. So we'll be careful not to do that today.
Yeah, Josh, how do you feel? Every day is like, it's like a news dump.
No doubt. And it's like Keith said, it's great. I mean, not only does it give us content to talk about in classes and in articles and things like that, but it's ever changing. It's exciting. And athletes have so much more freedom and authority than they did 3 years ago, 5 years ago, et cetera, as you both know.
Yeah, we have a professor in the building, University of Iowa. Man, I feel so honored to be on with you guys. But let's dig right into it. Josh, so many student athletes and their families are navigating this world of NIL that we've been talking about for the very first time. Can you explain to us what is the big difference between registered and unregistered agents?
Sure. I think the state registration process, for example, it gives athletes another layer of protection. It gives athletes and their families another layer of protection because that if the athlete is registered in a state, that they've taken the steps that they're legally obligated to take, right? And you're trusting this individual to help guide you with some things. So you want to make sure that they have done what they are legally obligated to do to come work in your state. And that's no different than an attorney, for example, has to do certain things to practice in certain states. Teachers have obligations to teach in certain states. So agents having to go through certain processes in states to work in those states, to me, that just adds another layer of protection for athletes, that they know that this person has done what they're supposed to do. And that's a simple starting point for me.
Right. So they're registered with who, like the Attorney General? Like, I know you guys are both attorneys, for those of us who are not attorneys.
Yeah. And it can vary by state. Typically we're talking about the Secretary of State's office, typically.
Okay. And what's a unregistered? Like, what does that mean? And I ask this because on my feed, I've seen this a lot. And I was actually in prep for this show, I was talking to Keith and I was sharing this like a non-attorney. I'm not really sure what that means.
Yeah, great question. And so again, it's no different than hiring a real estate agent, right? You want to know that person has gone through the necessary trainings and has the necessary experience. Well, hiring your agent to help you with NIL, you want to make sure that they have jumped through the necessary hoops. And again, those hoops aren't a big deal, right? It's just crossing some T's and dotting some I's in the states where you want to work. And so you want to make sure your agent has done those things. And that's a simple question that you ask at the outset when you're trying to pick who's going to help you, right? And to me, if the individual says, oh no, I haven't done that, well, set them aside, right? And move on, because there's lots of good ones out there who have done the right thing, right? Who have taken those necessary steps. So
I know I'm going to ask a loaded question here. Talk to us about the potential.
I get scared, Keith, when you say that.
I know, but talk to us about like what you see as the potential consequences. And I know this varies state to state, but what are the potential consequences for some of these situations? For some of the unregistered folks. And
great question. And so I think really, it can get pretty scary, right? If an athlete hires somebody who hasn't taken the necessary steps by working with the state and getting properly registered, well, what does that mean they're going to do when they're working on your behalf, right? Are they going to cut corners with you, right? Are they going to charge you too much? Are they going to forget to do something? What's that mean? Are they going to or encourage you to take a deal that might not be the best fit for you, right? So I think you want somebody that's gonna take all the necessary steps, and to me, registering with the state and becoming registered, that's simple nuts and bolts of doing business in a state. So if they're not willing to do that, well, where else are they gonna cut corners down the line?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, for the audience, for those that don't know, and Jay knows this, but Josh and I had the pleasure of working together, and we got to work together on many things. So, I've seen Josh in action, asking these questions, prepping student athletes, and that was always fun to work on these things. But I think you're exact when you say put them to the side, that's very apt, because there are a lot of good agents out there. You're 100% dead on. And I've always loved your mentality of putting that student athlete in the position of being the employer rather than the employee. That was one of my favorite pieces of advice that I've ever heard from you to a student athlete. So I think when you're talking about, setting somebody to the side and asking the questions, yes, the student athlete is the boss.
Yeah, that's right. Common misconception there, right, Keith, that people think that it's the agent running the show. No, by definition, the agent works for you, right? So, this is the athlete's career. This is their brand. This person should be working on their behalf, helping guide them along the way, but it's the athlete's decision and call as to what they want to do.
Right. And part of that comes with the student athletes. Like anytime you hire any professional, right, it's incumbent upon you as someone who's hiring someone to ask the right questions, to understand what your representation means, right? Like sometimes I like to use the analogy of going to the doctor. Like I always ask my doctor to speak in regular terms, right? They'll throw out, like, we have to do a ZHT test. You're like, what is that? Right. And so would you encourage student athletes and parents to throw up their hands and ask, like, hey, can you explain that to me? What does that mean?
Yes, exactly. Just like you said, Jay, if you're in your doctor's office and you didn't see the right diplomas on the wall, you'd get out of there real quick, right? You're not let them put their hands on you. Same thing with agents, right? You got to ask those questions. And again, there's resources out there. You can do a simple Google search and find suggested questions to ask, and that's something that Keith and I worked on down through time, is coming up with dozens of different questions that athletes and their families can ask of prospective agents until they find the right fit.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we move forward, because we're going to dig into this, we're going to get into questions to ask, and I'm really excited to have you here with Keith and I. But also, if I'm just a parent at home, and think about this, a lot of parents are just helping their child out. This is new to them. Most parents are not student athletes, right? Like we see the Marvin Harrises of the world who went through this, and they have so much knowledge. But if I'm sitting at home and I'm a parent or a grandparent or aunt and uncle helping out, why should I care about this?
Well, it's a big deal, right? I mean, you're entrusting this individual to represent you, right? They are an extension of you and your family and your brand, right? So having somebody that you feel comfortable with going out, because you're not always going to know exactly what they're doing and what they're saying and what they're pursuing on your behalf. So you got to be able to trust this person, right? You want to be able to put part of your career and part of your brand in their hands and know that they're going to represent you and not do something that to your detriment, right? And know that they're going to put your interests above their own at all times, because that's what they're legally obligated to do.
So one of the big misconceptions out there, I've got the honor to go speak at a lot of different schools. I get to hear a lot of different questions from student athletes. And one of those big misconceptions out there is, hey, when I hire my NIL agent, is that going to be the same as, you know where I'm going, Josh? Is that going to be the same as my professional agent?
Yeah.
And of course, there can be some conflicts there, but any thoughts on the differences between an NIL agent and a professional agent?
I think there can be a lot of differences, right, Keith? I mean, your professional agent that you hire, you're hiring that individual to negotiate a contract with a team or an organization, right? And I mean, that can be a very different skill set than someone that goes out and tries to procure NIL arrangements on your behalf, right? I mean, you can have the same person or same group that excels at both of those things, but it's definitely worth exploring. Right, you're going to hire your NIL agent most likely when you're attending a university. Then you called it your professional agent, right? Your contract advisor. You're going to hire them later. Mm-hmm. So why not go through another round of agent interviews and evaluation to determine who's the right fit for you when it comes to negotiating your professional contract with a team or an organization.
Exactly.
And what are some potential downfalls, right? We read about the Matthew Saluka case, the quarterback from UNLV. We know there were some issues there, and not directly speaking upon that, but what are some potential downfalls that could happen if you're not paying attention to some of the things that you and Keith are talking about?
Right. And I mean, like, for example, we had the privilege of working at Baylor, and the state law in Texas is so protective of the athlete and the school. Right. And so, like, for example, the agent that negotiates that professional contract with the NFL team or the WNBA team, that agent's there's got to be a document affixed to the representation agreement that you sign. And that document provides an extra layer of protection for the athlete. So, that it would happen all the time. We'd have agents come from out of state and they'd say, well, I want to represent this Baylor athlete, but they didn't know that they were supposed to affix this document, right? So that can really cause some issues for the athlete down the line. It can negate the agent contract that the athlete signs with the agent. And then the athlete's got to start over, right? So again, let's make sure we get it right the first time and really be thorough and not just sign with the first agent that hits us up and sends us a direct message on social media.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing that a lot right now, especially with the NIL agents. And shoot, we're even seeing classmates of student athletes, somebody that's sitting in their econ class and says, hey, buddy, I'll represent you, type of thing.
Well, it's uncharted territory, right? We don't, the NCAA seems like it wants to do something to have a database for NIL agents, but we haven't quite figured out the best way to do this yet, have we?
No, not quite yet. And you got optimism towards the future, and you got possible solutions with this area?
I mean, I'd like to think so. I mean, like we both have said, there's good folks out there who would do a great job, and it's just athletes have to find them, and it might take a little bit of work, but it'll be worth it in the end, right? To whittle it down and find somebody who's always going to have your best interests at heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I love that. I mean, we've covered, registered versus unregistered agents. What are the pitfalls that student athletes and their families could experience, and kind of what the future could look like? Talk to us about how to properly select an NIL representative, this attorney that you and Keith are talking about. What should student athletes and their families be looking for?
Yeah, I think as far as steps, I mean, I think having a few different options, right? If you have multiple individuals reaching out to you saying, "Oh, I'd like to work with your athlete," or "I'd like to work with you, athlete," keeping track of who's reaching out, and then ultimately interviewing them, right? And I think the process, a good process, can be having a set of questions that you ask each individual person, right? Ask the same questions, get your answers, and compare, right? And maybe you have 4 or 6 or 10 or 12 people reaching out. Whittle it down to a couple. After you start interviewing them, whittle it down to a couple, and have some more questions that you ask of them, right? And then see, okay, what's it going to cost me, right? What is your fee going to be? And Keith, I don't know if you're experiencing this, but I think a lot of athletes don't realize that's negotiable, right? You don't have to. Yes. If the agent says, "I'll take 20%, you don't have to pay that, right? You can negotiate that just like you can with a real estate agent or an attorney, right? So I think a lot of athletes don't appreciate that is negotiable. And if you can get one agent to say, "Well, I'll charge 15%, well, take that to your other finalists and say, "Well, this guy's going to charge me 15%. What say you?" Right? You can play them off each other and get the best deal for you.
Jay, one of my favorite lines of question, because Josh and I have sat in on a lot of those interviews with student athletes, and one of the questions I loved, and there was a follow-up question to it with, what other athletes do you represent? And getting a list of those types of athletes. I always felt like that was really important, Josh. And then I thought the other line of questions was, have you ever been fired from an athlete, and why? I felt like those were 2 very important questions. Yeah,
the great point, Keith. And we could talk about a lot of different great questions. I think that's one of the best, right? And give me contact information for current clients and former clients too, right? And reach out to those individuals and get the scoop, athlete to athlete, right? What's this person really like? I think that's a great starting point. Yeah, you're exactly right.
So you guys are both saying you need to, do your due diligence, have an interview process, and just like you would hiring anyone else, ask them for references, right? Like, who have you worked with in the past? Who are you currently working with? What other things do you think, without giving away all the sauce, right? Like, what other kind of things should you walk away from that interview meeting knowing to help you make a decision?
Yeah. What, Mr. or Ms. NIL agent, what's your plan for me, right? What's your plan for me? Where you should know enough about me, right? You're recruiting me. You should have done your homework on me. You should know what I like, what I don't like. You should know how many social media followers I have. What's your plan for me? Give me a couple of pitches that you would give to some brands that you think align well with me, right? Let's put you to the test and see how much homework you've done on me and what I like and what I don't like. And then I think the biggest thing is feeling comfortable with this person. I mean, I would not suggest that you need to be friends, right? But you need to feel comfortable that you can get them on the phone, that they're going to respond to your text, and that they're going to be honest with you, right? Because you, the athlete, you might really want to work with this local car dealership or a big brand. Well, are they going to shoot you straight and say, no, they're out of your league? Or are they going to be honest with you, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to go too far here, Josh, because I think we're missing one other really cool aspect too: the difference between an advisor and an agent. Because I know in some of those pitches, we hear different interpretations of what that means. And I know some of the student athletes, some of the coaches, and some of the administrators out there that are listening to this show and following this show. I know they're listening and they're saying, okay, what exactly is the difference between an advisor and an agent? And I think you've always done a good job of providing a good explanation as to the differences between those two.
Yeah, and so I think when we think of individuals who are going to help us navigate becoming a professional athlete, professional in the eyes of the NCAA, those advisors, they can help us, right? They can help us look at potential contracts, right? Provide feedback on potential contracts. By rule, they can talk to us about, well, if you get, drafted in the second round, here's what a potential salary would look like. But again, by rule, they're not supposed to be interacting with professional teams and organizations on your behalf, right? That's when they become an agent, which can be okay, but we just got to keep in mind there's another set of rules and regulations that apply to agents that don't always apply to advisors, and vice versa, right, Keith?
Absolutely. Yep. And which is why I'm asking the question, because I think both of us have encountered those situations, and we've got some stories of, folks that were advisors that were likely unregistered as an agent, and that put themselves out there as an agent when in reality they were an advisor, or they should have been an advisor. Crossing that line is not unfamiliar. But which is why I'm asking the question, because I know a lot of folks they're not into the weeds. They haven't seen some of the things that we've seen. They don't know some of the differences. So I think that's why I'm excited to have you on, Josh, because I think you do a really good job of making this digestible, helping to understand what the differences are. Just some of the basic ABCs of this area.
Right. And I think probably it's always a good reminder that, athletes, you've got administrators in your athletics department that can help navigate a lot of these things. And that's what they're there for. I mean, right, Keith, that's what we did that for years. Absolutely.
Impartial third party.
Right.
So you guys bring up some great points, right? Talking about experience, reputation, understanding, making sure that that whoever you select has an understanding of the NIL regulations and that they have an alignment with the athlete's goals, right? Like you were saying, Josh, like what's your plan for me? Can you guys, both of you guys actually, could you share some example where athletes benefit from having this thorough process that you guys are talking about, or where they face challenges due to some of the poor choices? I think you could just give us generic, because we know that you guys, just being the professionals you were, would never directly, speak on someone's case. But could you give us maybe some scenarios, both of you?
Yeah, there's a story that I always caution against, and that's even a registered agent not understanding all the rules, right? And there's, because you gotta think there's state laws about agents and how and when they can recruit athletes. There's professional league or regulations, right? So NFLPA rules. There's NBPA rules, all right, Players Association rules from the professional leagues. And we should also mention, while we're talking about it, agents need to be certified with the professional league as well, right? Not just the state, but with the professional league as well. And I've seen an agent registered with the state, certified by their professional league organization, come into a school in my presence and ask an athlete for a verbal commitment to be that individual's agent after the season. I said, whoa. that's an agreement, right? That is an agreement to represent that individual for their professional career. And that while it may be a future agreement, the NCAA sees that as an agreement. If the student athlete said yes and the NCAA found out about it, there goes that athlete's eligibility, right? Because in the eyes of the NCAA, that athlete is professionalized now. So while we may not like all these rules, they're there. So I think it comes back to schools have resources, right? They have administrators that can help with these issues and navigate this process. Because even a well-intentioned agent might misunderstand the rules as they apply to our athletes.
So, Jay, I think you bring up a good question. Like, what are some good examples? And I'm going to throw this out there. I'd love for Josh to throw some comments this way, because what we're seeing in the NIL landscape is we do have agents that will go out there. I think there's two different, areas for the agents. One, the agent that's going out and securing brand deals, right? They're getting the deals with Coca-Cola, with Red Bull, the local coffee shop. They're securing those types of brand deals. But then I think we're also seeing the agents that are going out and they're working with the collective, or at some point the school, what that type of, payment might be, coming from the school side. And I think what we're seeing is two different sets of rates. In some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, the agents are, they have a set rate for the types of brand deals they have, but then they have sometimes they'll have a different rate for that type of collective deal. And, hopefully that is a lower percentage. In my opinion, I would think that would be a lower percentage. Josh, have you worked on anything along that line? Any thoughts about, some of the different types of rates or what we might see here in the future?
No, Keith, I think what you're saying makes perfect sense, right? That it doesn't have to be a one size fits all rate, right? That it can, an agreement between the NIL agent and the athlete can be structured such that there's different percentages paid based on who the deal is with, right? And I think you're exactly right. That deal with the collective, why should the athlete have to pay a higher rate for that deal? That's a great point.
Right, because I'm just thinking as a layman here. So some of these deals, if you're going to use a collective, that's kind of something that kind of might go with going, I don't mean this legally, but like going to a particular school is going to open up a collective opportunity. And that's something to what you guys are saying is like, why should they potentially get a higher rated deal? It's not like a brand deal where you're literally going out there to the open market and finding Procter & Gamble or Gatorade or whatever product you want to throw out there. Those are totally different situations. Is that what I'm hearing from both of you guys?
Yes, absolutely.
Jay, you're saying it better than me. So
yeah, that's what we have here.
You guys have the real knowledge. If you know, I'm just listening to you guys and making sure that I have an understanding, because I'm like, I have two legal egos here. So go ahead, Josh.
No, you said it perfectly.
Yeah, and Jay, here's the other thing to think about. Like if you say you got a college athlete and they do have a NIL agent, and the NIL agent is getting a cut of all the different NIL deals. What happens in the scenario that the student athlete is able to secure a deal without the agent? Let's say uncle owns a business or a company and they want to sign the student athlete to a deal. Is the agent still getting a cut for that, for a deal that they really didn't bring in? I think that's one of the other questions out there that,
that's a good
savvy student athletes should ask is, are you getting a cut of every deal that comes in or just the deals that you're bringing in? Does that make sense, Jay?
I think it is. And I'm just going to ask, again, you guys are from the legal side, so I'm asking more from just like the consumer side. My question would be, are they providing any add-on value? And I don't know the answer to. So are they looking over the contract? Are they giving advices? Or is it a situation where, like, for example, if there's $100 local deal, okay, for a yogurt place because the athlete loves smoothies and they go there. How do we handle that, guys? Does that make sense what I'm asking here?
Go for it, Josh. You got.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely a place. I would ask that the athlete have someone look at the written agreement with the yogurt place, right? Whether it's an agent, whether it's an attorney, have somebody look over the agreement. Like, for example, we don't want to turn over our NIL in perpetuity by accident, right? We don't want to do something like that. So definitely have somebody look at it. But in that scenario, if it's just, athlete goes into the smoothie shop every week and one time they're in there and the owner says, hey, can you post a couple things and I'll give you some free smoothies? Did the agent do anything to help procure that deal? It sounds like no, right? Now, maybe if they look over the contract, maybe we need to compensate them somehow, but they don't need to be getting 20% or getting some of those free smoothies, right?
Right. I'll add this.
All right.
I see some of the agents, maybe in that specific example, maybe the agent's not as involved on the contract process, but where I do see a lot of great agents kind of contributing value is in coaching up the student athlete on how to execute correctly with social media and the FTC regulations, and helping the student athlete prepare for the tax consequences of those types of deals. So I feel like, not aside from the contract aspect, I do see a lot of great agents, doing some good work in that coaching aspect, leading up to the execution. Great
points, Keith. Yep. And that might even be something that those great agents you're talking about, they might just do that and not worry about a fee, right? They're going to wait and charge the fee on a bigger deal.
Right. Because that's a scenario. Yeah. And we bring this up because we know this is happening with a lot of student athletes, right? They're getting the smoothies or something locally. And exactly what Keith, the owner, comes to you, says, hey, while you're here anyway, because you clearly love the place, because you're coming here, we didn't even pay you. You just showed up. Could you post once a week or once a month, whatever they agree upon? And a lot of times there's actually not even money being exchanged. It's just goods and services. So in that scenario that you guys both pointed out, charging a fee, and this is something obviously people can figure out individually, but I'm just kind of painting out the scenario. There's actually not oftentimes money being exchanged, but goods and services, although there is a tax potential implication, right? Because there's some coaching up that Keith alluded to, right? Because we know accepting over a certain amount. I'll give a real quick example. I was watching a social media influencer I really like, and I use YouTube, guys, as like an audio podcast when I'm driving. So I'm listening to someone. At a time, I'm always learning, continuing education, and this content creator almost wanted to quit because what had happened was they had received a DM saying, hey, do you want these goods and services from a large company? They were like, yeah, awesome. So it's just the packages, and you'll see this a lot on student athletes, but this was not a student athlete. And they posted, they got free gear. End of the year, they got a huge tax bill in the range between $50,000 and $75,000 of goods and services, right? Because you start getting, I don't want to say a brand, but like sporting good attire or some of these things that rack up. And the content creator then had to go figure out how to pay taxes at the end of the year. And they literally almost thought about quitting because the number is so high, right? If you get $75,000 worth of goods and it's taxed, that's a sizable tax bill. I'm not a tax person, so I'm not saying what that number is. But guys, walk me through this. Is this a real life scenario, or was this a dramatic YouTube video that had me white knuckling it to my location? Because I was riveted.
Yeah, I confess, not a tax expert either, but certainly, we've all been taxed on goods and services before, like you said. So ideally, that's something that if we're talking about agents, that the agent is providing counsel on along the way, right? That hey, you can do this deal, but just know that Uncle Sam's going to come calling at the end of the year, and we need to figure out a way that you're prepared for that.
I think to your point, Jay, these companies that are hiring student athletes to do these NIL deals, they're not always doing it out of the kindness of their heart. This is a marketing expense for them. And so when these companies are going to their end of the quarter, books, and they're having to mark down, what they spent in marketing, and document the various expenses, they need to document what they're doing for marketing expenses, and that would include an NIL deal. So they are submitting something, documentation wise, in their tax statements. So, it benefits that company to claim a higher expense, the actual retail value, not like a wholesale value on these types of products. And, I think sometimes, the student athletes are thinking, well, I'm getting a discount, I'm getting free gear, I can find a bargain for it. But, what they're not understanding sometimes is, well, that company is going to try to document as much expense as possible for their books. And, I think that's actually what the student athlete's going to get taxed on.
Yeah, no, and I love it, and I'm so glad you guys are speaking to that, because one of the things, as someone who's hired and has managed a budget and is managing a budget for influencer marketing, you're spot on, Keith, because a lot of people have a line item on their budget, and some of these companies are publicly traded, so they actually have to track all of these things, right, for financial, to be compliant with their stockholders. So there is an actual plan to say, hey, we're going to reach out to micro or mid-level influencers and send them out these products. And the understanding from the brand oftentimes isn't malice. They assume that you are a business person and that you are aware of these things. And it may be in there, you may not, because a lot of, when you get outside of an NIL space, a lot of these people, if you look at some of these influencers, they have agencies representing them like across the board, and they're handling all of this for them. So guys, as your student athletes, I think you guys bring up some great points about making sure you guys have the right team in place, that you are working with your school for these resources, because as an influencer, as you're becoming an influencer marketer, the assumption is from the brand side, specifically large corporations, is that you're on top of all of this because they're moving quickly, right? They're sending out packages, like you said to Keith. What do you guys think to that? And then just commentary, because that's just my side of it from the marketing experience.
Yeah, great questions, great scenario, and you're right. The businesses, the brands, assuming that the athletes are business people, right? Having that assumption, well, athletes, we need to act like business people, right? We, like you said, Jay, we got to have the right team in place, and we got to make business decisions, right? And again, it's also new still. It's relatively new. So, but again, we gotta up our game and be business people.
Yep. I think you're spot on, Josh. 100%.
Yeah. And Keith, you're seeing this. And what is your commentary on that as well? Because you're out across. You're out literally right now. So we do this interview in a hotel. You're going to meet with student athletes today. Can you talk about the importance of having that team? Because I know in previous interviews that we've done, Josh, Keith has said, I want to be part of your team.
Yeah. I'm currently on the road. I'm ready to be home, but I think I've had 7 universities that I've spoken at in the last 10 days here. About to head out to another one here today. But one of the points I do point to with the student athletes when I talk to them is, one, social media, make a decision whether it's a toy or it's a business, because everything you're doing on social media is a business decision at this point. But I also do tell them that businesses are looking to do business with serious people that understand the landscape, that understand everything that we're talking about here. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to at least be a little bit knowledgeable about these types of things, about the business, keeping track of this type of stuff. So there are and there's great resources, things like our newsletter, things like the FTC guidelines that are out there. There's a lot of great resources that are out there to help coach these student athletes to get these professional edges, and Jay, one of the things I will say, like Josh is a professor in the sport management program. And like one of the things that I'm seeing at a lot of sport management programs as I go around the country is student athletes enrolled in those types of courses. That is excellent. Because, I think that further exposes student athletes, even if that's not their major. I think them getting into those types of classes to really, hone some expertise, and at the University of Iowa, I would encourage any of the Iowa student athletes, take a course with Josh and, get polished up on it. He's an excellent resource.
I love that. We're so happy to have you so far. We've talked about registered agents versus unregistered. We've talked about how to select the right agents and some of the things that are in play. And we're going to talk, full steam ahead. We're going to talk about the timing of an engaging an agent and the roles potentially of schools, for the roles of schools working with student athletes. But before we do, you guys both bring up a good point. We have a valuable resource. It's free. And before we move forward, we have to talk about it. Remind you guys, we have our weekly newsletter. It has a free checklist. If you sign up for it, it is www.brand&athlete.com/playbook that we put together, which has a checklist that you guys can go through to make sure you're starting up properly. Because you really, as you guys have both said so eloquently, you really have to educate yourself. You really have to make sure that you're ready because it's a huge opportunity. So we're going to keep going. We're going to dive in. I'm really excited for the second half of this show. The second half, we're going to talk about the NIL opportunity, right, Josh, requires a lot of representation. That's what I've heard from both of you guys today. And when you're considering hiring that agent, what time frame should you be looking at for an NIL? Let's say you're looking at this NIL certified agent, right? That we guys talked about, that's working that's registered with your state. Maybe they're, depending on what you want to use them for, when should they engage that sort of an agent?
Yeah, great question. I think it depends on the athlete's timeline as far as NIL involvement, right? If they want to be really involved, their first year on campus, okay, then you probably need to start earlier, right? But if maybe, and Keith, I'm sure you can speak to this, but maybe the athlete wants to just be on campus for a year and kind of get their bearings and all that. Maybe they can wait to engage with the NIL agent if they're not going to be as involved with NIL activities. But definitely when the athlete starts to be interested in NIL activities, having a team in place is definitely a good starting point.
Josh, I think the different levels of competition or different levels of classification. Power 4, lower level D1s, D2, D3, NAIA, junior colleges, high schools. I feel like there's a different timing perspective. For some of those. I mean, not all of them are going to have a collective, obviously, but I feel like the timing is going to be a little bit different in how that person evaluates different things. And it's not to say that if you're a D2 or D3 level student athlete, these things aren't possible, because we're seeing quite
I was about to say, I was going to have to give a shout out to my D2, D3, NAIA junior colleges. I have so much love for those athletes. Go ahead. I said throw them a shout out, Josh.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's just different, individually, case by case, what opportunities are prevalent. And, Jay, like the interactions, the follower counts, and a lot of those things that you've eloquently, talked about in the past, which make a student athlete attractive. I think it's all different, case by case.
Yeah. And I even think, one of the things I've really been watching in terms of when I hear you guys talk, it's basically, you don't have a time frame. It's based on your activity and where you are, because we know there's, for example, I don't want to say his name, but there's a very hot high school prospect in basketball. Matter of fact, I first heard about the young man. He has one of the best TikTok videos that's a trending sound right now. You guys go on TikTok and find it. It's really good. But his deals, the deals that we're hearing for numbers are huge. I mean, you're talking NBA numbers for a high school person. And the reason why I bring that up, because what you guys are saying is it's not based on the level where you are or even the year. It's based on what the activity level is. Right. That's if it's, for example, if you're in a state, even in high school where it's allowed, for example, and you have potential things coming up, then that's when it's based on activity, not on like where you are, whether you're sophomore, junior, senior, or what level you're on. It's based on, okay, guys, we're ready to really hit the button on this NIL opportunity. Is that what I'm hearing for you? And I just want to ask it in a way that everybody at home understands because you guys get this stuff like backwards and forwards and inside and out.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Jay. I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay. Well, let's talk about this, guys. As we talk about the scenarios, Keith, and as we move forward, when these deals are getting complex. So talk to us about involvement. The reason why is just as a layperson who's following it on Twitter, we're talking about that high school scenario, not him, but just the opportunity. When are the opportunities so if you're in high school, for example, we're not giving advices, should those people begin to learning about this? We're talking about the parents and the athletes themselves. Would you recommend they go, because like you guys said, there's internet opportunities. There's people like yourself and others who've published documents that put them out there. Believe it or not, right? Some of these schools produce it, put it out there on the internet. Should parents be reading about this?
I think so. I mean, I think we see a lot of parents getting involved, trying to protect their son or daughter, and trying to be knowledgeable about this. And I think we do see a lot of savvy parents out there that have a lot of business expertise, and they get this more so than they think. They're just not as familiar with that terminology of NIL, but they understand business. That's essentially that's like one of my big takeaways from this arena right now.
So Josh, like, for mom and dad at home who might be an insurance agent, a teacher, whatever it doesn't matter. And they're thinking like when in their mind should they start this? I just want to make it like really practical. They're sitting at home, maybe at their kitchen table trying to figure this all out. Like what is your recommendation to them?
Yeah, I think it can really depend on the individual and the family scenario. But I mean, I think being there to support the athlete and maybe you nudge them along a little bit, right? Say, hey, are you thinking about this? Right? You've got this following built up. This is something you can do for yourself. You can start building this up, and we know that most of our athletes aren't going to play in their professional league, right? But this is definitely an opportunity where NIL involvement, that can look really good on a resume as you start a professional career. So parents can definitely be involved and provide that little nudge, or maybe that it's better for them to stay away. I think it just kind of depends on the individual, but having the knowledge to be there in case son or daughter has a question or wants some help. There's so many resources out there that parents can utilize proactively.
Yeah, definitely.
So just quick thing before we move on. I know you guys talked about some of the opportunities that are available. Talk to me about a little bit of the downside. I really just want to hit a little bit home, because one of the things, Josh, that you just hit on is this is a massive opportunity, right? For some of our student athletes who don't go pro, which is the vast majority of them, this could be earning potential wise, right? Like the ability to run up a following and to get brand deals could literally change someone's life, right? We had Connor Prince on earlier, one of ours. He went to a D3 school. Shout out to Connor Prince. That's our guy, friend of the show, right? 200 plus deals. Now, I want to give a shout out to him because I always like to keep it real. He just did a video where he flew up to Portland, was at a Trailblazers game. They invited him into the arena. He's shooting on the court. You can go to his TikTok. I'm not promoting. I'm just telling you the massive opportunity. He was at D3 school. Now he is a major full-time influencer. And what are some of the pitfalls, though? Because I think what happens is, as human beings, we have this immense ability to see the upside and minimize the downside. What are some of the pitfalls that could happen?
Yeah, I think, especially, at this level of athletics, Power 4, Division I, but all the way down. I mean, athletes have a lot of demands on their time, right? I mean, that's why they're called student athletes, right? They're students, they're athletes. And there's actually some really good, the academic in me, I feel like I have to point out some really good research that's out there about how now athletes might feel like they're adding a new identity. Not only are they students, not only are they athletes, now they're influencers or they're brand managers as well. So there's also some research out there about NIL involvement and its effects on student athletes' mental health.
Yeah.
So again, making sure our athletes are taking care of themselves mentally, physically, and not getting overly wrapped up in any identity, right? Whether it's the athlete part or the influencer part, but making sure that they can effectively balance all these demands on their time and take advantage of the opportunities that they have instead of the opportunities taking advantage of them.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And the mental health, you don't want to overcomplicate your life and put too much on your plate. But some student athletes can handle it, some cannot. And I think one of the things that Jay's mentioned before is being organized. Having your calendar, having a system to really, do all this. And Jay's more the organized person out of the two of us.
We're both organized.
But you have a very detailed checklist, where how you approach things. And I think that's very valuable, into maintaining mental health and that balance that Josh is speaking to.
Well, and that's where that team comes in, right? They can say, hey, is it really worth, going and signing autographs, for 2 hours on a Saturday morning? You're only morning off for, is it really worth it just for this little payout? Let's focus on something else on Saturday morning, right?
Does that also lend itself? I'm just riffing here as you guys. I'm just listening to you guys talk. Also about having the team, because one of the things I love, I consume for the opportunity to create. And one of the things, if you follow a lot of content creators, they literally have a team, and that's why they're able to scale things. And I think one of the things I've even learned on this journey is making sure that you're leveraging resources so that you're not so strung out, and in terms of the mental health part that you're talking about. And sometimes I think we have to really make sure we have an abundance mindset as business entities, so that we don't think like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to pay this person, but it's 10%, but it's 10%. Maybe you have to pay this person 10 or 15%, but maybe then you don't have to worry about every little thing in the execution. Because so what you guys are, and give me, you guys, just my layman's side of this. But I do think is that the reality, then the conversation I really appreciate with you guys, the raw part of it is that you are a business entity, and there's a lot of moving parts to it. And ultimately, regardless, even if parents are involved, the athlete is the CEO. And I say that because ultimately no one knows them and their brand and who they want to be better than you as the athlete. So what do you guys think to that part of it? That's something I've really been leaning into.
Yeah, I think having people around you who don't always just tell you what you want to hear, right? But say, no, I don't think this is a good idea, or ask for more money, right? Things like that. So, and again, like we said earlier, I mean, you're the business, right? So let's step up and be a business person.
Yeah. Yeah, that's spot on. I mean, you just have to have an honest support system with you to tell you exactly what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
Yeah. I mean, Jake Paul is not putting together that Tyson fight by himself. The reason I just talk about what's real, guys, right? Like, there's no way he's running a complete podcast, one of the best podcasters in the world, that he's got Prime Energy drink, that he has the fights. And then don't forget, he's also training, world-class boxing trainer. I mean, so I love having you guys, because I think these are the authentic conversations, because I just try to put myself when I was 19 years old and I rolled on campus and trying to put all this together. I always think about the mind of me at 19, right? And you guys are so savvy, and would love to have had both of you guys to help me along the way. So I appreciate that. Before we wrap up, we got to talk about this, right? There's some conversations. There's a lot of things going on, talking about, with the House legislation, potentially the athletic departments getting involved in this exact representation that we're talking about. And I want you to hear from you guys, because what I hear from both of you as experts in terms of a academic perspective, you guys are both practitioners doing it every day. Both of you write and speak on this topic. It sounds complicated to me. So Josh, off the rip, I got to get a hot take from you. What is your take on schools getting involved in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's coming, right? But like you said, Jay, it's coming. Schools are going to become way more involved. They're going to be able to go out and facilitate and negotiate potential deals, right? Identify potential deals. And I think that can be good. That can be very good. But that doesn't, to me, that doesn't take away the opportunity from the athlete, right? The athlete can and should still be their own brand, their own business, if that's what they want to do. They can still take advantage of that opportunity. They don't have to. They're not going to have to do everything that the school wants them to do. They can. Right. They're. What we are seeing is the athlete is still in control of their own name, image, and likeness. The NCAA has said that the athlete has to maintain control of their own name, image, and likeness. And thus, if the athlete wants to go find something on the side that the school has not found, they can still do that. They should still do that, right? So I think there might be some athletes out there who just say, okay, the school's going to handle all this. I don't need to do it anymore. Okay, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But again, the opportunity is still there for athletes to go do their own thing. And I think we'll still see a lot of athletes do that, right? I think there's still going to be a space for collectives in the future, even if athletics departments take more control. I still think there's a spot for collectives.
And why do you feel that way?
Well, I think that. I think that schools are going to have more control, right? They're going to have a lot more involvement, but there's still a space for collectives who might be able to identify certain kinds of deals that maybe the school's not as inclined to find or equipped to find. I think that we'll see collectives adapt, and I think collectives might look a little different, but I still think there's a place for them in the future.
I couldn't agree more, because I think there are going to be business opportunities beyond what schools might be able to allow for. And I think what we are seeing with some collectives is, they truly are, helping the student athlete, get that experience with some of those businesses beyond, the school, beyond just what, folks would call pay for play. I think you're right. I think there is still going to be a space for some of these collectives.
So let's talk about some of the challenges, Keith. I want to address it because, Josh, you go first, or Keith, or whatever order you guys want to do. Because one of the challenges we see people in transfer portal, how much does it make it that maybe you're at XYZ school this year, you transfer, now we've got these legal contracts. Like, how does that happen? And how would that be addressed potentially?
Yeah, go for it, Josh.
Like this to answer it.
Jay, I think it depends so much on what that piece of paper actually says, right? What the agreement that was signed, but now between the athlete and the collective. In the future, what's that document say that the athlete signs with the school, right? Is there some type of buyout, for example? Is there some type of penalty? Are the payments front loaded? Are they back loaded? So for me personally, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see where this thing goes. But to me, that's why it's so important for the athlete to know what they're getting into, what they're signing, what that document says, because now, I think an article just came out late last week that talked about schools or conferences, now putting a 27-page document in front of an athlete and saying, here, you're turning your NIL over to us and you're getting this, we're going to put this payment number in bold, but there's some language down here that's smaller that the athlete really needs to know inside and out. Not to suggest that athletes that schools and conferences are taking advantage of athletes on purpose. That's not what I'm saying, but rather I think it just speaks to the importance of the athlete getting good counsel and having a good team in place to know exactly what they're signing. Because Keith, the thing that actually somebody in athletics told me that really resonated with me, here we are in this era where we're not signing NILs anymore, right? I'm sorry, we're not signing NLIs anymore, right? These
common mistake.
I know we're not signing our NLIs anymore. Now we're signing our NIL agreements with the schools, right? But you did this a version of this for so long, signing financial aid agreements with student athletes, right? So from the school's perspective, we've been doing this for a long time. We've been negotiating with our athletes for a long time. Athletes that, I would suggest that the onus is on you. You got to make sure you know what you're signing and take advantage of the ability to negotiate with the school. Like, you have more authority than you've ever had. Take advantage of it.
Yeah. And this idea of, and I've heard it floated out there, Josh, the idea of optional versus mandatory representation, from schools. I don't know how much chatter you've heard on that specific point, but I'm curious if you got any thoughts on, the student athlete, kind of opting into, or not even opting in, but if they sign with the school, they have to do this mandatory representation versus an optional type of representation system where they might already have a team in place before they're signing with the school. Just curious if you've heard much on that front.
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second. I think I froze up.
Can you rephrase that, Keith, for him?
Yeah, absolutely. Have you heard much about like a mandatory type of agreement versus an optional type of agreement for representation by a school?
Just a little bit. What are you getting at there, Keith?
I'm just curious as to your thoughts on the student athletes preserving that option to, continue to use a team, somebody they might have used in high school, junior college, previous school that they've been at, versus, walking into a situation where they're mandated, essentially, you want to go to this school, you have to use the school.
Yeah, I think there's definitely benefits to preserving some flexibility, right?
Yeah. And then I haven't heard too much on that, but I've heard a little bit. I think it is kind of this struggle for maintaining control in a lot of aspects. Just that's something I think about. So hasn't been a huge topic yet, but it is starting to, become more and more prevalent in some of the conversations that I've been part of.
Yeah, it's really interesting take too, right? Because I think, as a former student athlete, I remember when I walked out of the house the last time before I was headed to Baylor to run track, and my dad said, "Hey, the school knows what they're getting out of you. Make sure you know what you're getting out to school. And that was the best advice he ever gave me, because when I came to campus, I was looking at the Career Center. I was looking at all the senior faculty. Some of these people ended up advising me on my career. They were not even in the athletic department. They were over on the campus side. And I think back, because the three of us have actually done a lot of these, what is it, was it National Letter of, NLI. So to bring everybody in the speed, Keith would get them, or Josh would get the deals, make sure it's signed. And then I was doing social content, and Keith or Josh would say, do we have the green light to announce this? Might go to the coach, the AD first, and then we'd release it. So this is all kind of coming full circle for us. As we kind of wrap here, guys, walk away, help us give a piece of advice. Because one of the things that I am struck that really strikes me as I listen to you guys talk is that as much as things change, they stay the same. Like, the advice my dad gave me resonates true. I won't give the year because I'll give up my age, but it's as true then as it is now. So if you're at home and you're listening to this, or you're driving in your car and you're listening to Josh and Keith, I'm gonna let you go first, Josh. What piece of advice would you have to students and parents?
Well, Jay, honestly, I would have struggled with this question until I listened to what you just said, and it's something that has struck me since my time working day to day in college athletics, and that's we have on our campuses, and this does not matter if it's Division III, Division II, or Power 4. There are so many resources on our campuses for athletes, and not necessarily just within athletics, right? I mean, if you're an athlete and a brand sends you a proposed deal and a contract, and you don't understand something, walk over to the law school, walk over to the political science department where there's somebody with a law degree, and ask a faculty member. They would love to help you, right? You've got lawyers on campus, you've got marketing professionals on campus teaching classes. There's so many resources on campus as a starting point, right? You might not listen, you might not take their advice perfectly every time, but they can send you in the right direction. Your school has resources. Take advantage of them. And I've thought that for decades now, that we in higher education, we owe it to our athletes to help them with these things. And so take advantage of those opportunities and those resources on campuses.
Man, Josh, that's so, man, that's the sauce right there, as the athletes say. That's the sauce. That was great.
Well, it came from something
I
you said.
Give a shout out to Josh for sharing that.
Yeah, I feel like I see more and more schools developing programs, hey, we're going to give you some tax prep type of help, or maybe it's through the business school or something like that. Take advantage of those types of things 100%. And Josh knows this well, but one of the mandated things, within the NCAA rule structure for decades now is a professional sports advisory committee too. And that's I don't know if you're terribly familiar with that, Jay, but there is some language in the rules that the school is to have a professional sports advisory committee, which it's composed of different folks. You might have the athletic trainer, you might have a law school professor or marketing professor, but essentially as a student athlete contemplates a decision to go professional or to measure their options, they can go to this type of committee and to kind of weigh these things, get advice on different things in this aspect. I know Josh led that committee, during our time. So I think I did for a little bit, but, I know I definitely did at a couple stops, but, things like that are incredibly valuable. They don't get highlighted in social media nowadays. I don't, do all student athletes take advantage of that? No, they haven't. But it has definitely been something that's been an option and been a resource for student athletes for a long time. And, I think as Josh said, as you said, Jay, get what you can out of the school as well. There's a lot of expertise there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's so poignant. And I'm gonna give a piece of advice, not necessarily legal, because you guys are so good at that. I would say, as a former student athlete to current student athletes, utilize the resources and find someone on campus who that you can talk to. A lot of people use words like mentors. Maybe just find someone you regularly meet with. It could be within athletics. It could be without. I had someone whose name was Dean Schmelterkoff at Baylor. And I was having some struggles with organizing my own schedule, classes, where I was supposed to be, team. We had all these things. It was like a huge step up from college. And I just went in there to his office and said, hey, I'm just having problems organizing things. And he was the dean at the time. This is back when deans wore sports coats and they were very, very formal. You guys remember it had shoes with tassels. And he just literally sat down with his office and just turned his computer around. And he helped me develop a schedule and utilize the resources. It said, hey, go talk to this person over here. So one of the things that I found from that relationship is being able to throw up my hand and ask for help. But I had someone who didn't want anything from me. He didn't need anything from me. And his role was that I believe he has a namesake still at Baylor working. But his passion in life was helping student athletes, just helping young people and students. And he was so profound. I don't know if I'm sitting here today talking to you guys without him, because he was a bridge that helped me through. So I say to student athletes, as complicated as all this sounds, I say simplify. Find someone who's in your quarter, who you could just go to lunch with, and it's not always about deals and what's going on. Maybe it's just someone that you can just check in with life. And then when something comes up, you have a relationship in your pocket already that is going to go 20, 30 years and can help you. So that would be mine. I don't have the legal advice that you guys have, but I would say, as a student athlete, man, our campuses are a treasure trove of resources, talented people who literally are waiting to help. And your opportunity in front of you is to figure out, how can I leverage those? So that would be my advice. Guys, what do you think on that as we kind of wrap up? We're going to go around one more time before we close out, and we're going to let Keith take us home.
Yeah, Jay, you're so spot on. I'll leave the final words of wisdom here to Josh. He's been an awesome guest.
Yeah,
so knowledgeable. Wow.
Real quick, Josh, can you come back? The reason why is and Keith and I were talking about this, I feel like we have more to talk about. I'm gonna let Keith talk, but I hadn't talked to Keith about this, so hopefully he doesn't get upset with me. But we'd love to have you back, because I feel like we just scratched the surface. So, but go ahead, Keith. Josh, will you answer, and then I'm gonna let it go to Keith.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it, and would love to come back.
Yeah, but Keith, go ahead. Sorry, I was in the middle of your deal.
No, I was just going to bring it home and let Josh, offer some final words of wisdom. And, what do you got, Josh? What do you want? What do you want folks to walk away with?
No, I think Jay said it really well. Keith, you said it really well. Take advantage of the opportunity. Don't let the opportunity take advantage of you, and utilize your resources. This is new for everybody, but there are good people out there who want to help you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I
love that. And here's one thing, as we wrap up, guys, and if you're feeling like you don't know anyone, don't be scared. I mean, I'm not saying Josh would condone this, but if you want to send an email to Keith or to Josh, DM us on our social accounts. If you need their information, I'll give it to you, because I promise you this, guys, you guys aren't going to find, I've known both of these individuals a long, long time. Their reputation in this business is the gold standard. And I always say, if you're a student athlete, you need to find not just the smartest people, but the people with the biggest hearts. And the reason why I say that is we look around and we look at what's going on in the world. Like, smarts is important, but people with a great moral compass and have a good moral character, which these two, so blessed and fortunate to know both of you guys. Use your resources. And if you don't know anybody, use social media, DM these guys. Both of their information is pretty public. You can just do a search. So, Josh, I can't thank you enough, man. Like, I think just a lot of the work that you're doing, the interviews that I've seen, the publishings that you're doing, the work is just profound on top of it. So I'm gonna let Keith, I just want to thank you because as Keith, said, hey, I think Josh would do a great job. I was like, wait, you know what? Josh is going to kill it. And you came through, man, and really brought the sauce. So, Keith, if you want to take us home, man, and shout out to you as well, Keith, for really helping us deliver this content to student athletes. Because I think now more than ever, this information, this conversation is needed.
Yeah, and I really do want to thank Josh and, want to thank Influxer for, their sponsorship, making this possible, helping us do these types of conversations and get that information out there. Visit Influxer.com or influxermerch.com. Check them out. That's an open option for just about every student athlete in the country. So check it out. And thank you so much, Josh. You're amazing as always. And you brought the sauce, as Jay likes to say.
But I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks a lot. We'll see you soon.
Be the story.